really quite eye-opening polls coming out from the New York Times, the liberal paper of record. Put this up on the screen. They did polling of swing states. And in 5 of those 6 swing states, Trump is winning. Leave this up on the screen so I can just go through all of the numbers here so people get a sense of what we were dealing with. In Nevada, Trump 52, Biden 41. In Michigan, Trump 48, Biden 43. In Georgia, Trump is up by 6, 49 to 43. In Pennsylvania, Trump is up by 4, 48-44. In Arizona, Trump is up by 5, 49-44. And in Wisconsin, this is the one state where Biden's hanging on by his fingertips. He's winning 47-45. I probably do not need to remind you that last time around, Biden won every single one of these states. That Nevada number should be really shocking to people because I don't think Nevada even ended up being all that close. It's one of the states Democrats have continued to perform well in, even as some of the demographics there have tended to shift to the right. Let's go ahead. I'll give you some of the details and then Saagar, get your reaction. Then we can show some of the additional polling graphics we have here. Part of what is driving this shift to Trump, voters under 30, some of those people that we saw at the march there, now favor Mr. Biden by a single percentage point. 1 point. Voters under 30, key part of the Democratic coalition, favor Biden now by a single point. His lead among Hispanic voters is down to single digits. His advantage in urban areas is half that of Trump's edge in rural regions. So he's still winning in urban areas, but it's not nearly like what Trump is doing in rural areas. Women still favor Biden, but men prefer Trump by twice as large a margin, reversing the gender advantage that has fueled so many Democratic gains in recent years. Let me throw one more at you. Black voters, long a bulwark for Democrats and for Mr. Biden, the New York Times says, are now registering 22% support for Trump in these states, a level unseen in presidential politics for a Republican in modern times. And I'll give you a quote from one of the respondents that they interviewed here, a guy named Spencer Weiss, 53-year-old electrical substation specialist in Pennsylvania, says, "The world is falling apart under Biden. He backed Biden in 2020, but he is now backing Trump, albeit with some reservations." Quote, "I would much rather see somebody that I feel can be a positive role model leader for the country, but at least I think Trump has his wits about him," Saagar.
Yeah, I think, look, and this is where even everyone always tries to make it about a certain thing. I actually think the single biggest problem for Biden is he's too old. Go and put this up there on the screen, please. C2. Share who think each candidate is too old. From 34% in 2020 to 71%.
Listen, we tried to tell you last time around.
We tried to tell you. Yeah, exactly. And I remember actually getting a lot of hate mail about that. And we were like, oh, you're making fun of a man with a stutter. Oh, yeah? It's just a magical stutter that reappeared whenever he turned 78 years old. 34 years old, 34% to 71% of the American people. Only 18% have thought about Trump, 39%. Now, by the way, 39 is still high, but I mean, Trump is leading that by double-digit margins. Now, does not have the mental sharpness to be president. Look at that Biden figure. 2020 was 45%. 2023, 62%. That's almost a supermajority. Trump's mental sharpness has actually gone down in terms of people who think that he doesn't have it and does not have the temperament to be president. This is probably the worst one for Biden because this is why a huge number of people voted for him.
Yep.
39% in 2020 said Biden did not have the temperament. Now it's 51. Trump had a 58 in terms of people who say he didn't have the temperament, and now it's 55. To be narrowly tied with Trump on the area where you most were able to succeed him in terms of I have the statesmanship, I have the temperament, I'm not Trump, which again, the vast majority of people who voted for Biden, whether they admit it or not, did it because his name wasn't Trump, not because of anything that he was actually saying or wanting to do. This is the biggest, the core problem. Put the next one, please, up there on the screen. Cohen goes into this. How Trump has fared now in the Times and Siena polling. 4 years ago, it was Democrats +2 for Joe Biden. Today, it's Republicans +5. A named alternative, this is actually pretty interesting in and of itself, like Elizabeth Warren in 2019 or Kamala, still has Republican advantage, although Kamala actually appears to be faring slightly better than Joe Biden, which takes skill.
That shows you how bad it's gotten.
Now, for an unnamed generic Democrat, they say Democrats +3 and Democrats +8. So generic Democrat and generic Republican actually both faring incredibly well in these. But
Dean
of course,
Phillips loving that number.
Yeah, but it's fake. It's like, it's not going to happen. It's going to be Biden, and it's mostly going to be Trump. Barring some black swan events, of course, which could, of course, happen, and we don't know what those look like. But on the path that we are today, we've got 365 days or so until Election Day. This is a blaring red signal. I saw Nate Silver say that too. He's like, look, the American people have been telling you for 3 straight years, he's too old, he's too old, he's too old. Hey, by the way, he's way too old. He's old. Did you hear me? He's old. And Democrats are like, no, we're not going to do a primary. We're not going to do any of that. We're going to start, Biden's going to have to start going up the short stairs on Air Force One. We're just going to cover it up as best as we can. People aren't stupid. Everybody knows somebody who is that old and has watched them decline. And it's just like, I don't know, man. You're going to put him in charge of the nuclear submarines? You're going to put him in charge of the nuclear arsenal? It gives people a lot of pause. And then on top of that, can anyone deny that the vibes of the Biden presidency have been awful? It's like you combine all these things. You've got Jimmy Carter levels of disapproval, and that's exactly what shows us. He's got the lowest presidential approval rating at this time in his presidency since every president since Jimmy Carter. Even George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton, all these people who did not fare all that well in the year or so before, they were doing better than Biden is right now.
And you know what? If people felt like their life was going great and they felt hopeful about the future, and then maybe they'd be like, Grandpa, he's lost his dad, but I can live with it, right? It's fine. Things are going pretty good. But people don't feel that way. They don't feel that way at all. And so, one of the reasons why Democrats were able to do as well as they did in the midterms, one of the reasons why they've done so well in so many special elections is because of the overturning of Roe versus Wade and the focus on social issues and the, I would say, real extremism, some may say perceived extremism of the Republican Party. But within this poll, nearly twice as many voters say that economic issues will determine their 2024 vote compared with social issues. And those economic voters favor Trump by a landslide 60% to 32%. Now, I've been pointing out for a long time here that at the beginning of the Biden presidency, when he was doing a lot of stuff that was like manifestly helping a lot of people, including sending out checks and child tax credit and student loan forbearance, all of these sorts of things that made people feel like, all right, I'm getting by, I'm doing okay, even as inflation started to spike, his approval rating was very high. Lo and behold, the story of his presidency has been pulling all of those things back so that not only are Americans, even before we talk about inflation, in a worse economic position than they were previously and seeing all of these things that were helpful to them previously go away under a Democratic administration. But then you also have, of course, the specter of inflation, which has made it so that people are taking a pay cut month to month to month. And it's no surprise that folks are feeling like, hey, the economy hasn't been too great under you, buddy. This hasn't gone too well. I don't appreciate the decisions that you've made in this regard. So you have that. You have, of course, the perception and the reality that he is struggling just to complete his sentences and, a sense of sort of listlessness and a sense that he doesn't really have control of the world around him. And then you've got, the Ukraine war, and now you've got what's going on in Israel and Gaza. So I don't think anyone should be surprised that you see these kind of numbers coming out in swing states. The writing has kind of been on the wall for a while. We talked last week about how much support RFK Jr. is actually garnering at this point in the general election. In this poll from Quinnipiac, he's getting 22% when it's a 3-way race. And that actually lifts Biden over Trump to 39-36 and then Kennedy at 22. I would say this is maybe the one thing that could save Joe at this point. And I do think it is a little bit negligent that the New York Times didn't include Kennedy. I would personally, and they have the money to do this, I would want to do a head-to-head that's Biden and Trump, and I would want to do the Biden, Trump, and Kennedy. It would be good to have Cornel West in there as well, though I think there are a lot more questions about whether he will have ballot access and whether that'll be a real choice going into the election, but it would be good to have him there as well as a reference point. Because when you're talking about a candidate who could potentially garner 20% of the vote, that in and of itself could completely change the dynamic. So I think that's maybe the one thing that the Biden team has got to be looking at with a little bit of hopefulness at this point.
And this is where, look, I just gave the case against, I think Biden probably will lose. If you were to ask me today, 1 year ahead, you can, make fun of me, a lot of stuff can happen in a year. I think at this moment, I think he's probably going to lose. But let me give the case for why I think he could win. What I would say is RFK Jr. could absolutely save him, especially in the margins. All he's got to do if he's getting 22% of the vote is shave off. I mean, all those margins in the swing states are 8, 9, 10%, at best.
Yeah.
That's not that much that he has to take. Let's say that he draws on average more from Trump than he does from Biden. Boom, you're golden. So even though you're only getting 30-something% of the vote in Michigan or something like that, you're still winning. So that a win is a win. That's how a guy like Bill Clinton, who only got 42% of the popular vote, became president with 300-some electoral votes in 1992 because of Ross Perot. So that there's not unprecedented to see that type of situation. The other case is let's be real. The New York Times Siena poll had all the Republicans in a red wave in 2022, and it was totally wrong.
Yeah,
I mean, they were off by almost 5 points. Democrats have overperformed in every single special election. Virginia is going to be a massive test for abortion on the ballot. If Democrats overperform here again, then that's a blinking sign that, just like Trump was able to get all of these like non-college educated whites like crawl out of the woodwork who've never been polled because they never voted before. Abortion has been a very similar, effect on the electorate. So I would, look, I like I said, I think Biden will lose. I think it's like 55-45, but I think that's a lot closer than some of the Trump people are trying to paint it as. 45% is, that's a better chance than Hillary had. That Trump had in terms of winning the election. He had only a 30% chance.
Well, here's the thing that Democrats will say. Here's their cope at this point, which I think, there's some real justification here for their cope. They'll say that right now all the focus is on Biden and his failures and what's going on with him and these wars and the bad economy, et cetera. As we get into a general election, more focus will be on Trump. And Trump, yes, he's been indicted, but he's going to have trials. He could be facing convictions, and that could change the dynamics here. That's one. The other thing is they feel like, some of these voters who said they'd vote for Kamala Harris, but they wouldn't vote for Joe Biden, they feel like those people are ultimately going to be persuaded to come home. They'll be convinced again that, oh my God, we can't do 4 more years of Trump, and they'll suck it up and vote for Joe. That's what they think is going to ultimately happen. And like I said, especially with the specter of Trump facing criminal prosecution, potentially being found guilty and being sentenced, et cetera. That's what they're hoping for, is that there's enough time between now and then that the dynamics could significantly shift, that some of these young voters who, are saying either they're going to stay home. It's not that they're really going to Trump, but they think they'll be brought into the fold eventually. So that's kind of what they're hanging their hat on. RFK Jr., I would say, is the real wild card here. And again, I just want to say, I don't know that RFK is going to be able to pull off 20% of the vote when it actually comes down to it, because typically support for third-party candidates ends up collapsing as you get close to Election Day. But I don't see how you can really justify just completely leaving him out of the analysis at this point. I just really think that changes the landscape significantly. And I've long said, right now, I think he takes more from Trump. I don't know if that will persist, especially as you do have so many young voters who are disgusted with Joe Biden over what's happening in Israel and our unconditional support for Israel. So I think those dynamics could shift. And, I really think one of the most undercovered political stories at this point is what's going on with him and the coalition that he is attempting to bring together. So that's something we want to keep our eye on.
Yeah, totally and completely agree with you, Krystal.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.